Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and rumor review here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, training camp cuts, waiver updates, a couple of very interesting pieces of news, and a couple of trade rumors involving the Devils, the Golden Knights, the Wild, and a couple of other teams. Which all the updates regarding all of these teams coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this with all of you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, we have another news and rumor video as per usual. We'll start off by talking about a couple of signings from our past couple of days. So there were 3 signings from our past couple of days we want to touch on here. One was in the Carolina Hurricanes organization, another in the Seattle Kraken organization, and another in the Nashville Predators organization. First in Carolina, the Carolina Hurricanes are giving PTO candidate Givani Smith an actual contract. They gave him a 1-year legal minimum deal to keep him in Carolina for the foreseeable future. So very interesting note there. Smith is a 27-year-old winger. He's a really solid player last year. Split time between Colorado and San Jose, putting up no points in 13 games. Really solid 13th, 14th forward. Could be a call-up option. Could be a spare sort of guy for the Carolina Hurricanes. So not a bad player to have. And Smith winds up turning a PTO into a contract. So very good stuff there for Carolina. Then we saw the Seattle Kraken sign Julius Miettinen, who was a 2024 second-round pick, 40th overall, to a 3-year ELC AAV of $940,000. Miettinen's a center/winger. He's 19 years old at this current point in time. Last year played in the WHL, putting up 11 goals and 39 points in 36 games. Not looking half bad. I definitely think eventually Miettinen can challenge for like a top 9 role in the Kraken organization. Not anything in the near future. Like he's still going to need a couple of years development time, but at least he's able to get out of contract. So very interesting note there. Miettinen has been given an ELC by Seattle. And then 23-year-old winger, the last big RFA remaining in the NHL, Lukas Evangelista, who was going heavy with the Nashville Predators, trying to work out a contract extension. They have finally worked together to complete a deal. Evangelista gets a 2-year contract extension AV of $3 million to have him signed for this upcoming season. So very good stuff there for Nashville. Evangelista was a really good player last year at 10 goals, 32 points in 68 games. He's a guy who has the potential to hit a ceiling of like maybe 60, 65 points and maybe like a 25 to 30 goal scorer. So like he has a really solid ceiling and he's a really solid younger player, which is something Nashville could desperately use. So seeing him get signed is very good. I do wonder if only having a 2-year term will lead him to be traded eventually, but for the next couple of years he'll be still with the Nashville Predators. So very interesting note there. But Evangelista has signed in Nashville a 2-year extension. Smith signs a 1-year deal to play in Carolina this year, and Miettinen is getting a 3-year ELC by the Seattle Kraken. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of injury updates. So when it comes to some injury updates, we've got a couple of things to talk about here. First, with Brian Rust, according to some recent reports, he's going to be out at least 2 weeks with an undisclosed injury. It's going to allow some of the younger players to get opportunities at the NHL level, but it's a bad blow there for the Penguins, as Rust is a really solid top 6 forward and potential trade candidate. Sticking with the Penguins, Jack St. Ivany, who's a really solid depth defenseman, 6'7" type guy, is going to be out the next 6 weeks with a lower body injury. So it's a bad blow there for the Penguins. St. Ivany, as we just said, decent depth guy, so to lose him is not overly good. The Buffalo Sabres have a couple of injury updates, as Pekka-Lukkonen is out week to week with a lower body injury, so that's a bad blow there. Lukkonen was probably going to be a team starter this upcoming season. They do have a lot of depth in net with guys like Levi, Lyon, Georgiev, so they have depth to be alright without him for a couple of weeks, but it's a bad blow there for the Sabres. Michael Kessling is also out week to week with an undisclosed injury, so hopefully he's not going to be out for an over a long period of time. He was the prime addition they got this year in the offseason, so hopefully he won't be out for an overly long period of time. Jansen Harkins has officially been placed on injury reserve, and like we talked about in one of our previous videos, will be out 8 weeks with an upper body injury, so it's a bad blow there for the Ducks, losing one of their depth players. Scott Lyon's out week to week with a lower body injury for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Callum Ritchie is out 1 to 2 weeks with a lower body injury for the New York Islanders. Nick Jensen played in a preseason game just a little while ago after having off-season hip surgery. And Matthias Janmark will be out at least 1 week with an undisclosed injury. So Lon, that's a bad blow there for the Leafs. He's a really solid bottom 6 forward. Shouldn't be out for an overly long period of time, but will at least miss the start of the season. Same thing with Janmark, solid bottom 6 guy. Gonna miss at least the start of the season with his injury. Nick Jensen being able to play in a preseason game after having off-season hip surgery is outstanding. Looks like he should be ready to go for the start of the season. so that could be a really big boost there for the Ottawa Senators. And Kyle Ritchie was a guy who was trying to make the NHL out of training camp, so this team going out with an injury and start of the season on injury reserve will not be overly good there for the New York Islanders. So very interesting note there, but those are all the injury updates regarding Russ, St. Avani, Pekka-Lukkonen, Kesselring, Harkins, Lawton, Ritchie, Jensen, and Janmark. Next, going over to the training camp cuts, as we just talked about in our previous videos. Just going to tell you the amount of players that got cut and some of the bigger names that were cut. Anaheim cut 6 players, including moving Lunio, Solberg, Klang, and Gaucher to the AHL. Boston cut 13 players, including moving Harrison, Lysell, and Farinacci to the AHL. Calgary cut 3 players. Dallas cut 1 player. Detroit cut 13 players, including moving Mazur, Wallinder, Lombardi, and Costa to the AHL. Edmonton cut 8 players, including moving Seminski and Hudson to the AHL. Florida cut 20 players, including moving Sachin, McAllister, Benning, and Alsher to the AHL. Nashville cut 3 players, including moving LaRue and Molendyk to the AHL. The Rangers cut 3 players, including moving Morrow and Perreault to the AHL. Philly cut 2 players. Pittsburgh cut 11 players. San Jose 1. Seattle 2. Utah cut 7, including moving Gabe Smith back to the QMJHL. Vancouver cut 1. And Washington cut 11, including moving Chesley, Cristal, Mugli, and Protas all to the AHL. So very interesting note there. Those are all mostly younger sort of players. So not too surprising that all those guys got cut, but still very interesting note there. Going over to the waiver updates. So over the past 2 days, we saw these players be placed on waivers. That was Bill Sweezy in Boston, Kearns Prosvertov in Calgary, Amadot and Gushchin in Colorado, Dries, Lagesson, Leonard, Mitchell, Shine, and Watson in Detroit, Deneen and Stillman in Edmonton, and with Lafute and Skoog in Florida, Bolduc, Brown, Chromiak, Godin, Gutman, Hicketts, Lee, Thomas, and Ward in Los Angeles, England in Nashville, Peterson in Philadelphia, Aho, Heinen, Kemp, Kopanen, Larson, and Pustainen in Pittsburgh, Gillies in San Jose, Myers and Stevens in Seattle, Abruzzese, Kachok, and Pelche in Tampa, Legzinski, Coughlin, Avoy, Megna in Vegas, Belpedio, Clark, Rabinski, Triniev in Washington, and Anderson, Dolan, Clegg, and Fagimo in Winnipeg. So very interesting waiver placements. I thought Anderson, Dolan stood a chance to potentially be claimed. I thought Coughlin could have been claimed. I thought Peronovich could have been claimed. I thought for sure Abruzzese or Pelche would have been claimed. I thought Heinen is a possibility, but he was making a high cap hit. I thought Englund was a possibility. I thought Thomas was definitely a possibility in Los Angeles. I thought Foote in Florida was definitely a possibility. I thought Mitchell could have been claimed in Detroit and Prosvetov in Calgary, but all those guys I just mentioned wound up clearing. However, we did see 4 players over the past 2 days wound up getting claimed. That includes Tampa, who claimed Phoenix Copley from Los Angeles, Florida, who claims Cole Schwindt from Vegas, Colorado, who claims Solovyov from Calgary, Minnesota, who claims Hunt from Columbus. So very interesting note there, like Tampa has some potential concerns with Vasilevsky, plus I think Copley's a better backup than Johansson, so it's not a bad pickup there for Tampa. Florida claimed Schwindt. That's not a bad pickup there either. Schwindt was originally part of the Matthew Tkachuk deal that went from Florida to Calgary. He was claimed off of waivers by Vegas, and now he's been reclaimed by the Florida Panthers. So after starting his career in Florida, Schwindt is back there. Colorado claims Solovyov, so very interesting note there. He's a decent 6'7" defenseman. So the Avalanche adds some defensive depth. And then Minnesota reclaims Damon Hunt. Hunt was traded to Columbus last year as part of the David Juracek deal, and now Minnesota's reclaimed him back. So not a bad pickup there. Sort of like Solovyov. I think Hunt could be a really solid 6'7" defenseman. So some very interesting waiver claims. And then earlier today we saw a handful of players be placed on waivers, including Soderstrom, Tuft, Callahan, Brown, and Merkulov in Boston, Smith in Carolina, Halverson in Tampa, Cam from Villeneuve in Toronto, Villalta in Utah, Amin in Vancouver, and Rempel in Washington. So very interesting note there. I think Brown stands maybe a small chance to be claimed, as does Soderstrom. Giovanni Smith, who we just talked about, was recently signed. It could see being claimed. Kampf has a really high cap hit. I highly doubt he gets claimed. Amin, another interesting one who can be a solid 4th line center. So there's a couple of guys out there, but I wouldn't be surprised if most of these guys wound up clearing again. So very interesting out there. Going over to a couple of very interesting pieces of news. First, when it comes to head coaches getting extended, Ryan Huska in Calgary, Chris Knobloch in Edmonton, and John Cooper in Tampa, who are all entering the final year of their deals, have all been extended. There was a couple of recent reports out there saying that Huska got a 2-year extension, not sure what the money value is. Knobloch got a 3-year extension, and Tampa quietly this offseason extended John Cooper. No one I've seen really has any info on the term or the money, but Cooper has has been extended by Tampa. So Cooper has been a really solid head coach over the past couple of years in Tampa. Knoblauch, who's helped Edmonton get to back-to-back cups, and Huska, who's really stabilized the coaching position in Calgary, all get multi-year extensions. So very interesting note there. When it comes to some players being released off of PTOs, Florida has released Ben Harpur, and Minnesota Jack Johnson off of PTOs. So Harper's not surprising. He was mostly an AH level guy, so he'll have to look for an opportunity elsewhere. Jack Johnson's a little bit more surprising, especially with Brody being injured this third season for Minnesota. That's a very interesting player who is not going to be on a PTO, so very interesting note there. And lastly here, going over to Carolina Hurricanes, recent reports are coming out saying that the Carolina Hurricanes are no longer trying to sign Carter Hart or Michael McLeod after backlash from the fans of the Carolina Hurricanes. So there's a lot of talk that McLeod was going to be the front runner to go to Carolina, and the Carolina was in the mix for Carter Hart along with Vegas. Apparently they sort of pulled out from both of them, and they're not going to try and sign any of those World Junior players. So very interesting note there. I'm not sure if this is the right move or the wrong move for the Carolina Hurricanes, but it just seems like all the backlash they were getting from that wind up deterring them from signing either players. So very interesting note there, but do not expect in the near future the Canes to sign either Hart or McLeod. So very interesting note there. Those are all the injury updates, training camp cuts, waivers, and other pieces of news from the past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got a couple of trade rumors to talk about. First, when it comes to David Pagnotta, he was talking about Lukas Reichel. We talked about this. There's a very likely chance Reichel gets moved in the next couple of days, and he says that teams he's heard that do have some major interest in Lukas Reichel are Edmonton, Vancouver, San Jose, and Detroit. So San Jose is always looking for some younger players. If he gets good minutes in San Jose, I think he could turn to a really solid top 6, top 9 forward. Detroit, I could see maybe like some sort of a swap, like maybe they acquire Reichel and the Hawks get Berggren. That could be an interesting like sort of young player swap of players who haven't really lived up to expectations in their current clubs. Vancouver makes a little bit of sense. They have a couple of really solid young players that I don't think it would be smart to take a roster spot from, but I guess it's a possibility. Edmonton's linked to them because they could definitely use another bottom 6 forward who's on the younger side of things, but also Stan Bowman, who was the guy who drafted Lukas Reichel as the GM in Edmonton. So very interesting note there. I think there's a very likely possibility Reichel will get traded in the next couple of days, or potentially just after the season starts. And I think Edmonton probably makes the most sense at this point in time, but I could see the reasoning for teams like San Jose, Detroit, Vancouver to have some major interest. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But keep an eye on Lukas Reichel and those 4 teams as potential landing spots. Next, going over to Josh Yohe, he was talking about Brian Rust, and he thinks that there's a very likely chance that Kyle Dubas would pull the trigger for the right sort of deal on Brian Rust. Rust has, I think, 2 or 3 years left, just over $5 million cap hit for what he brings to the table and how productive he is. He's on a very, very team-friendly contract. Now, according to Josh Yohe, he believes that Kyle Dubas hasn't gotten the right offers. He's valued Rust pretty high, which is understandable given the fact he's one of the best players on the Pittsburgh Penguins at this current point in time. And Josh Yohe does think that at this current point in time, Raquel and Carlson are more likely to get dealt than Brian Rust. So very interesting out there. No guarantees the Rust will get moved or he won't get moved, but it seems like the Penguins and Kyle Dubas will be open to a Brian Rust move so long as the assets are right and the trade package is right for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So keep an eye on Brian Rust, even though a trade hasn't materialized yet. Not to say that something couldn't come up in the near future, but definitely keep an eye on Pittsburgh, as I think they're going to be a very busy team this upcoming season, and I think Rust is going to be in the middle of it. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to Chris Johnston, he was talking about the New Jersey Devils, and he says that the Devils may need to cut some cap. They recently just signed Luke Hughes. They're pressed right up against the cap. They could probably make do with the current roster they have for the start of the season, but they're going to be in really tight cap situations, which might hold them from being able to call up players when they need to. So with that in mind, that's led some people to believe that the Devils could try and move off some cap. And Chris Johnston does say that guy whose names come up is Andre Palat. Palat has, I think, 2 or 3 years left on his current contract at a $6 million cap hit. He's been a decent middle 6 guy, but at his current point in time, he's not worth the money that he's being given right now. He's more of like a middle 6 forward, probably would be valued at like a $3 to $4 million player at this point, not a $6 million guy. So I'm not sure what sort of teams would really want to acquire him from the New Jersey Devils. I also think he might have have some trade protection too, so I don't think it's going to happen right now. I think the Devils are content to just start the season with the roster they have on right now, but like with Palat's $6 million cap, he was the guy I mentioned in the offseason preview video who I could very likely see wind up getting dealt at some point. I'm not sure if it's right now or if it'll be later on, but if the Devils really want to try and improve, especially by this trade deadline, they're going to have to move out some cap. And Johnston does say that Palat's name has come up in recent trade discussions, so we'll have to keep our eye on Andre Palat going forward. And lastly, going over to Elliotte Friedman. He was talking about Kirill Kaprizov getting his new deal and things like that. And he says that the Minnesota Wild could try and trade at some point. Maybe this doesn't happen, but they could try and pry Artemi Panarin out of the New York Rangers organization. Friedman says that Panarin has the same agent as Kirill Kaprizov. They're both Russians. They're both superstar NHL players. If the Rangers don't get out to an overly good start and they're not doing too well heading into the trade deadline, I've already mentioned this, I think there's a very likely chance Panarin could get dealt. And Minnesota makes some sense. Like, I know they probably have to move off someone to make room for Artemi Panarin cap-wise, but I mean, like, Panarin's a really solid guy. You add Panarin to a top six that's already going to have Boldy, Kaprizov, Eriksson Ek, and a couple of other younger guys. Like, that's going to be a scary top six if the Minnesota Wild were able to pull it off. Now, like I said, no guarantees that the Rangers even move Panarin, and if they were to move him, they wanted probably like a couple of first-round picks, a really solid prospect, probably a roster player. So I'm not sure if the Minnesota Wild even had the pieces to sort of get this sort of a deal done. But according to Elliotte Friedman, he was just speculating that with the Minnesota Wild signing Kaprizov, they probably promised Kaprizov that they wouldn't just sign him, and they would probably go for it this upcoming season, and that he wonders if maybe adding Artemi Panarin is a possible card that the Minnesota Wild could play. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But that's all I'm going to talk about today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about all that we discussed here today? Do you think that the Minnesota Wild could be a landing spot for Artemi Panarin should he get dealt? Do you think that the Devils will move Andre Palat at some point? Does Kyle Dubas move Brian Rust? And who do you think could land Lukas Reichel? Definitely your thoughts on all of that. Plus all of the news updates, training camp cuts, waivers, signings, injuries. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. I'm going to tell you this video, and if you'd like to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.